we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're gonna have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for another week. Sterling, I know you're tired, but how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, like you said, I mean, tired, sore. It's we're into the busy season at work this year for me, and it's busier than it's been since the beginning of COVID, honestly. And so, as some of you may have noticed, there was no Steelers game review this week. We weren't able to do our top and bottom five. We weren't even able to do our Thursday, Friday game picks. Like, time for me is very limited now. And so I think the Steeler game picks videos at the very least are likely done for the week, the game reviews or for the season, because I likely won't even be watching much more football this year, unfortunately, just because of how hectic and busy that work schedule is going to be.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of me riding solo here for at least the next month or so, but such is life. We take it as we see and move on from that. But yeah, Chicago Bears world is very happy at the moment. Obviously, I have been calling for the firing of Matt Eberflus for what feels like, well, pretty much ever since the final game of last season. And finally happened, man. The first time in over 100, for the first time in Chicago Bears history, they have fired a head coach mid-season.
Yeah, and I mean, after the game management decisions on Thursday night, or Thursday morning, I guess, Thanksgiving, there's no way you couldn't fire him. Like, at that point, if Ryan Poles did not fire him, I feel like ownership would have had to fire them both, because that was just abysmal. To have over 30 seconds on the clock, 3rd and 23, just outside of field goal range after a sack, and have a timeout left. You run a hurry up offense that was not very hurry up at all, instead of calling a timeout and ensuring you have the play you need to get into that field goal range. That was just such a boneheaded move. And then the way he went out there after the game and defended it and said, I would do it again. We had everything we wanted in place. And it's like, man, no, you didn't. Like, that is a situation where 100% of the time you're calling a timeout. Your quarterback gets sacked that quickly on second down, leading to a 3rd and 23. You have got to call a timeout instead of running the hurry up, because obviously that defense knows what's happening. I'm surprised Caleb Williams even had enough time to throw the ball on that with how the previous play went. I expected it to just be another quick sack and, oh, okay, the game's over. Either way, that was just a terrible sequence of events for the Bears, and capped off 6 weeks worth of terrible events back to back to back, over and over every week.
Yeah, and ultimately, this was a game, and going back to the game conversation, because obviously there's so much to talk about in this event for Chicago Bears fans and just the NFL world in general, because again, the Bears have kind of been hidden in their own little clusterfuckery of their own, and it hasn't, like, there was a little bit of media attention on it, like you listen to the talking heads throughout a bunch of the sports shows. Whenever they talk about the Bears, it's ha ha ha, look at how bad they are, look at how stupid their coach is. But then it would kind of get moved on pretty quickly, because again, they were playing Sunday games where no one was really paying attention to them all that much, other than that Sunday afternoon game against the Commanders, where they were basically put on America's Game of the Week type situation, and they were in full spotlight. But that game, like that's a situation where the Bears, they should have won that game. The Bears should have, over the 6-game losing streak, they should have a minimum of 4 wins. The Hail Mary should have never happened. The situation of where you had the kick blocked by the Packers, where all you needed to do was put the ball on, just run the ball essentially, and put it on a better hash mark and get better yards for your kicker to go up against where he's more comfortable. Then the week after, having your defense play horrifically in overtime when the head coach was calling the defensive plays. And then again, this scenario, like going back, I know there are some people that said, "Oh, Caleb Williams." That was, I would say, I would give the blame maybe 10% to Caleb on that one. Getting sacked on second down, he had a free rusher just go up and hit him. There was nothing that he could do on that play. With 33 seconds left, and you and I know this all too well just from our playing days in Madden. The second that happens, you call a timeout, because trying to get that rushed offense to get everyone back, to then get everyone set up for then Caleb to get the play communicated with everyone, to then snapping the ball. And he looked at the play that was given to him and said, this isn't going to work because we're going to have the exact same look, so I have to change things. And he then has to do that, and by the time the ball gets snapped, it's going, well, the game's over. And it's a situation of where you just called that timeout at the 33-second mark, the second that he gets sacked. Guess what? Yeah, sure, it's third down. Well, guess what? You're in 4-down scenario anyways. All you need to do, a quick 5-yard out route. Again, is it perfect scenario for the kicker? No. But this is why you pay kickers, to go out there and make these sort of kicks in these tough scenario. And sure, you might have the pain scenario of going like, oh, well, he had his kick blocked last week, and then he had the game-winning kick blocked the week before. You can't allow that to dictate the scenario. You have a quick pass out to the sidelines, and boom, there you're in some good position. And guess what? If that play didn't work, well, then you're going into a scenario where you're going to have to go for a Hail Mary anyways. But at that point, you have time, as opposed to it just rolling. That is 100% a coaching error. Of just like, and even not calling it immediately after, and seeing the offense just where DJ Moore and Cole Kmet are looking at each other like, what the fuck am I supposed to do on this play? You call a timeout with 12 seconds left. At least that gives you an opportunity to go for a Hail Mary. Like there's just so many scenarios there that you just look at it and go, again, us as Madden players, we can look at that and go, we would have handled that 10 times better than a NFL head coach who's being paid millions of dollars. I've been calling for it for weeks and weeks, and I know the exact scenario happened where I said I want the Bears to lose this game in a heartbreaking fashion, because that is going to be the only way you were going to be able to move on from him. Now, I know one of the things that you simply stated was if Ryan Poles didn't fire Matt Eberflus this week, that ownership was going to have to step in. There's reports that Ryan Poles wanted to fire Matt Eberflus after the Patriots game, where he said, I wanted to make that move then. And ownership said, you have to wait and hold on. And it was Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren having to convince the ownership to move on from Matt Eberflus. And they finally said this week, okay. And, you know, that statement, it's better now. It's too little too late. I know some people are having that opinion, but it's better late than never in this scenario for the Bears, because what this also allows you to do, if you are the Chicago Bears, is you have a guy in Thomas Brown who, again, 2 weeks ago was your passing game coordinator. But by all accounts, he's a guy that the entire NFL knows is going to be a head coach at some point. The NFL has looked at Thomas Brown and says he will be a head coach. Sean McVay, when he was the offensive coordinator for the Rams, he was the assistant head coach. That's a massive indictment for Sean McVay to look at a guy in Thomas Brown and go, you are going to be my number 2 guy, because you are that quality of a coordinator and someone that you can trust that much. And we've seen the difference when Thomas Brown took over the offensive play calling for the Chicago Bears, where it was an instant connection and just made Caleb look like the number one pick that we should have seen from week one. Like, imagine if Thomas Brown had been calling the plays since week one, the difference this team would be. There would be no question of who the offensive rookie of the year is. It would be Caleb Williams. He would have broken records in week 6, 7. We'd be talking about Caleb Williams going for that 4,000-yard passing and being this level of a guy. This is a 5-week job interview for Thomas Brown, because the big question here for him is, can he also call the plays while doing the responsibilities of a head coach? And unfortunately, there's no way to really know if a guy can do that role is until he does it. And Andrew Whitworth, one of the best offensive linemen we have seen over our generation. He was with the Rams. He won a Super Bowl with Thomas Brown being the offensive coordinator. This is what he had to say. He said, "I'll say this again for all NFL execs. Thomas Brown, the offensive coordinator for the Bears, leader of men, rare cat, will be a head coach. If I've always felt young offense side of the ball, Mike Tomlin." Not talking Tomlin's success, just the conversation is knowing exactly who he is and what he's about, and he's about the right stuff. We've talked so much about our differences in head coaches, and me being the offensive minded guy and you being more of the defensive minded CEO guy, and obviously basically saying go out there and try to find a Mike Tomlin. If Andrew Whitworth, a guy that very respected, says this guy is the offensive minded Mike Tomlin, I want to see these 5 weeks. If Thomas Brown goes out there and has this team, let's just say they win the last 5 games of the year. Again, you're going to have to go up against the 49ers next week. You're going to go up against the Seahawks, and then you play each of your division rivals one more time. If you go 5-0 over that stretch and the team looks completely different, it's hard to not say that Thomas Brown isn't going to be the next head coach of the Bears.
And really, that would almost be best case scenario too, because then this organization doesn't have to go into the offseason and jump into that coach carousel and run all their interviews and try to find the right guy and compete with some of these other teams for the big names out there. Like, I think even if he's able to pull out 3 of 5 wins in this, then that is a positive review for him in being given that job, because that's just it. Like, we have that different mindset, offense and defense, but where we agree is it's more the leadership capability. It's not your play calling, it's not your philosophy, it's can you lead and can you organize your team. And if Brown has that ability, then he should be the head coach, because that's exactly what this organization needs. You need somebody that's going to bring everything together, and at that point, you don't have to worry as much going into next year, where you're like, okay, so, did Thomas Brown do good enough that now he's going to go to another team and we have to hire a head coach and an offensive coordinator that are going to be able to get along, where most of the head coaches you're going to be looking at hiring anyway are going to be the offensive play callers, like Thomas Brown, like Ben Johnson, like Cliff Kingsbury. Like, all those guys are going to be a head coach who's also calling your offensive plays. So your OC's coming in and effectively just running the drills during practice and things like that. And so this is a great opportunity for Thomas Brown with a team that has severely underperformed this season. And so even if he can get them up to a mediocre level, it's going to look so astronomically better than what Matt Eberflus was able to do, than what Matt Nagy was doing before that, than what we saw out of
John Fox, Mark Trustman, literally going back to Lovie
so
Smith.
many.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is a key 5 weeks for this Bears organization. Like, I feel like the fans aren't even going to be watching these games and cheering for the team to win. They're just going to be watching these games and going, are guys like laughing on the sidelines now? Are they getting along? Like, are we seeing, chest bumps and high fives and smiles, even if they're behind? Like, that is going to be a key thing, and it's Thomas Brown getting in there, getting in the scrums on the sideline, getting right up to his players and coaching them,
Yes.
like you talked about Mike Tomlin, and Tomlin said it best earlier this year, and I feel like he was taking a direct shot at guys like Matt Nagy and Matt Eberflus, where he was like, some coaches resist the urge to coach.
Yeah.
And that is what it's felt like in Chicago. Is like you've got these coaches that all they're worried about is self-preservation instead of doing their damn job and being a coach, getting in there and telling a guy when he fucked up. And it's like, you don't do this. Like, this is not the time for that shit. I don't care if your ego is bruised. You get your ass to the sideline, you stop wasting time, you do your job. And if Thomas Brown is able to do those things and get this team on the same page and just get them having fun again, then this Bears team may have found their head coach of the future. And if he's not, so be it. At least
You gave it the
we
best
know
shot.
that Eberflus is gone and the change will come next year. I just think this is the best case scenario because at least Caleb Williams is already familiar with Brown. So it really isn't going to be that same Bears transition where it's like, oh, it's a totally new coaching staff with a totally new playbook and an idea of what the offense should be. Because Brown's coming in here going, work like, I've been working with this guy since draft day.
Yes.
We know each other. He knows what I want out of him. Even if Shane Waldron was calling different plays, he knows what I want. And so this is going to be a smooth transition for Caleb Williams. It's going to be an easy transition for Thomas Brown. This is big for the Bears. This is going to be probably the biggest 5 weeks that you guys have had since your last playoff run.
Yeah. This is one of those things where the best case scenario for all Chicago Bears fans here at the moment, and I know that I've been on the proponent. Again, you listened to our podcast last week where we talked about so many of these coaching scenarios where I said the best case scenario for the Bears is getting Kyle Shanahan, where the 49ers fire Kyle Shanahan. I still think that is the best case scenario, but I also was saying that in a world of like, this is a very, like I said it in the podcast last week, the chances of this happening are so astronomically low that it's not really worth considering, but we're doing a fun haha exercise. Thomas Brown being the next head coach of the Chicago Bears is without a doubt the best case scenario for this team. Because again, like what you said, you have that just ability to have Thomas Brown. He knows Caleb Williams. He's worked with Caleb Williams. They've worked together. They're going to have that connectivity where you're not having that scenario of going like, oh, well, you're bringing in a completely new regime for a rookie quarterback. This is also another interesting scenario for Eric Washington, the Chicago Bears defensive coordinator. We know he wasn't calling plays this year. This is a guy that is well respected, and he was brought over to be the next defensive play caller for the Bears. It was going to be, Matt Eberflus is going to call it this year, and then Eric Washington is going to take over from the year after that. But we've seen the Bears defense kind of have some of these struggles these last few weeks. And I think it's good that we're going to have a different guy calling these plays because it's just going to get it back down. So this is an audition for Eric Washington to be Thomas Brown's defensive coordinator. Because again, we always talk about the offense getting new playbooks and this type of stuff, but we don't really talk about the defensive side. And if the defense next year, if Thomas Brown is the offensive coordinator, or the head coach, and Eric Washington gets hired back on as the DC, and he's going to be able to do the job at a good level, well, guess what? The defense is going to be just as good, if not better, going next year because they don't have to learn a new system, a new guy. They already have that connection. That to me is also just a big, big, big thing. And if Thomas Brown isn't the guy, then so be it. You did the best that you could. You gave him 5 weeks. Now, I don't necessarily think 5 weeks as an interim head coach is going to be quite good enough to take your eyes away from a guy, for instance, like Ben Johnson or a Joe Brady or a Liam Cohen. But at least with this, you're giving the Bears the best possible option to see if they have a guy. And again, for me, seeing Andrew Whitworth talk about Thomas Brown the way that he did, saying he's an offensive-minded Mike Tomlin. And again, I still think that the Bears need to get an offensive-minded guy. The entire offseason should revolve around, Caleb, what do you need? These last 2 weeks, with Thomas Brown as the OC, we've seen exactly that Caleb Williams was advertised. Caleb Williams is playing as good of ball as any quarterback in the NFL is. You want to know how many quarterbacks have thrown for multiple touchdowns against the Detroit Lions defense this year?
I think just him.
Just him. Every other quarterback that has gone up against the Detroit Lions this year has not been able to throw for multiple TDs and go up against that team and do what they're doing. Caleb Williams has had to go up against 2 top 5 defenses these last 2 weeks in Minnesota and Detroit. He has 5 passing touchdowns, almost 800 yards, or not. He has almost 800 yards in the 3 games against the NFC North, but he has over 500 passing yards, getting close to 600, and no interceptions against 2 top 5 defenses back to back. Then you couple that with the extra amount of yards he got from the Green Bay game. Now, he didn't have a passing touchdown in that one, but again, they're just phenomenal numbers. You have your guy. It literally took the Bears drafting a guy that you can't break, that even the Bears couldn't break, for them to finally have a quarterback. And again, I will always state, you can't judge a rookie quarterback off of his rookie season. You have to wait those 3 years to kind of get a full gauge. But this is one of those things, as a Bears fan, you're looking at going, it doesn't look like we have to completely fix this guy going into year 2. Like, he looks like a competent quarterback halfway through his rookie season, where it's like, oh, this guy looks good. It's a very weird, unique feeling.
It is. I mean, I will say that this season isn't over, and while he's looked better and the offenses look better, like, he still needs protection. That's going to be 100%. It. Is, can he stay safe and healthy through the final 5 weeks? Like, because this offensive line is
trying to get him killed.
It's holier than Swiss cheese at this point. Like, he is getting hit way too much, and it's just at this point only a matter of time before one of those hits he falls bad. And so that is a key thing for these next 5 weeks. And honestly, going into the draft next year, that's where you guys are in that catch-22 spot as well. It's like, yeah, we want to go 5-0 so that we know we've got our head coach next year. We're set there. But then you're so far down in the draft position at that point that you're like, we're not going to get the top offensive lineman in the draft anymore. Whereas if you guys lose out, then you're like, okay, well, now we got to find a head coach. But hey, we are going to get the best O-lineman available because all these other teams are going to grab quarterbacks and Hunter Henry. And so the best O-lineman will be there when we're up to the podium.
Travis Hunter. Not Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's the tight end for the Patriots.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah.
All good. But yeah.
You knew who I meant. Yeah.
Yes. The only thing that I will disagree with you on that one is this is such a deep tackle group and offensive line group that if the Bears, let's say, win 3 more games this year and we can ultimately determine that Thomas Brown is the guy, I would not be upset about that, because the Bears are going to draft an offensive lineman, and there's going to be guys like Will Campbell who are looking like he could play both tackle and guard in the NFL. There's so many of those guys. Like we saw in my mock draft, there's probably going to be 6 or 7 offensive tackles selected in the first round this year. So but again, getting that top guy, I don't think there's necessarily a consensus on who is. I know once we finish the college season, I know I'm going to start streaming a lot more of like actually doing my scouting reports. So make sure to kind of hang out for some of that type of stuff, but we'll see a little bit more. But yeah, I agree with you. The offensive line needs to be addressed, but then again, you're going to have 3 top 50 picks to do that. And if you decide to go tackle, guard, center with all of those, well, guess what? That like you instantly get much better at the offensive line. Now you're putting 3 rookies in there, and that could be a little worrisome for a lot of people to ultimately deal with, but you also have $80 million in cap space. You can go sign Trey Smith, the guard from KC, bring him in,
Yeah.
and then you
And
only have to have 2 rookie offensive linemen.
yeah, and that is exactly it right there is they need to take that cap space and they need to throw it at their offensive line. They need to find anybody who can improve it around the league and bring them in because yeah, you can draft tackle guard center and hope that you strike gold. But the problem is, outside of last year when you guys had, Caleb Williams and Romo Dunze, the last couple of years, that's kind of been what has been happening in the drafts. Is you're like, we're just gonna take every offensive lineman we can possibly get and hope for the best. And that hope has not turned out.
Yeah.
Like yeah, some of those guys have developed into good O linemen, but they can't stay healthy. And so that's the issue. It's like, yeah, we got a good guy, but he's only out there for the first 3 weeks of the year, and then his hips bugging him, his ankles bugging him, his knees bugging, like whatever it happens to be. Like you guys need somebody that is a proven commodity in the league, and so that's why I think first and foremost it does need to be whoever the top guys are available in free agency. The Bears need to be focusing on that O line before they worry about anything on their defense or anything else.
I 100% agree,
Yeah.
and I saw a report today from an insider that says Caleb Williams is going to be used as a sounding board this offseason for all the decisions. And it's going to be, what do you think of this coach? What do you think of that coach? What do you think of this player? What do you think of that player?
Yeah.
Do you think we should go in this direction? And that's essentially the Bears saying, we think you are our franchise quarterback, and we are purposely going to make your life as easy as possible going into the future, and basically just saying to you, like, we want to build this thing around you and center it around you. And that's the smart way to go about it. We've talked a lot about the Chicago Bears here today, and again, throughout the week, I know that I will probably have more to talk about with the Chicago Bears. But this is a really interesting scenario for the NFL this week. Again, we talked about the Bills a little bit with that snow game. Congratulations, Josh Allen, for getting engaged to Haley Steinfeld. Finally got his ring. Probably the only ring he's ever gonna get. Um, it's that's gonna be a really interesting game to watch because again, is it even gonna happen on Sunday night, or is it gonna happen on Monday night or a Tuesday night? There's going to be a bunch of different discussions along that. Is Doug Peterson going to get fired at the end of the week, or is that going to be a scenario where they just stay at the end of the year? And I guess I'm going to make this a Chicago Bears podcast, but
Well, I mean, I think one of the surprising things that happened this week is, we all knew Daniel Jones was going to find his new landing spot this week. And
yep,
there was speculation,
where it was going to be.
all week leading up to it. Where's it going to be? There's teams that need a starting quarterback right now. Jacksonville, maybe San Francisco 49ers. Like there were places he could land for sure to round out this season. And surprisingly, where he ended up going was the Minnesota Vikings practice squad, which shocked a lot of people, I think, because you're going in there. Sam Darnold is the number one. So at that point, like Daniel Jones is going in there going, the only way I see the field is if Darnold gets hurt. Like
Yeah.
that is the only way he gets a shot to play football again this year. And so that really surprised me and I think a lot of other people. I think everybody expected him to go somewhere where he was at least going to have a chance to play at some point in the final 6 weeks to showcase that, hey, I'm not as bad as everybody said. I was only as bad as the New York Giants organization, which we know is terrible. And so that's why I think a lot of people were shocked because now he's effectively just going to not play the rest of the year and then hope that somebody offers him a contract next season.
See, for me, I was actually not super shocked when I saw him sign with the Giants. And the reason why I wasn't shocked was I think for him here at the moment, and again, he spoke about this when he did his presser with the Vikings, was I wanted to go somewhere where I liked the head coach and I knew the head coach was going to be able to develop quarterbacks and develop talent. And I think, yes, he signed with the Vikings practice squad, but I still think he's only going to be on the practice squad for a week, maybe 2 weeks. And it's
Yeah, he'll
that
be
like
the
that.
number two.
Yeah, that time is solely going to be him just essentially learning the playbook. And I ultimately think for him, he looked at it and said, "You know what? I just want to go to a team where I ultimately feel like I can learn a lot from Kevin O'Connell, who has been a solid head coach in this league, and he's been one of the more underrated guys, I think, up until this season. Even in this season, he's definitely been underrated, and I think he's looking at it right now going, I know I'm not going to be the long-term answer for this team, but let's just say I stay with this team going into next season, where I sign a cheap deal to be the backup to JJ McCarthy and help him along this road, because now Daniel Jones wasn't the first quarterback taken in his draft. He wasn't even the first overall pick in his draft, but he can at least help with JJ McCarthy while also learning from Kevin O'Connell. It could be a situation for him where he's looking at going, I saw what Sam Darnold did where he went to the 49ers and he was with a brilliant offensive mind in Kyle Shanahan, sat for a year, got an opportunity at some point in the year to show what he can do and play a little bit, and ultimately went out there and said, hey, listen, after a year of me sitting and being a backup and kind of learning a little bit from a situation of where I'm not being pressured to be the guy and go into that scenario, I think for him, that's kind of his mindset of going, I'm just going to kind of take this bit of the year and next year off essentially from being the guy while also learning and growing my craft and really just kind of building confidence. Because again, we saw guys like Baker Mayfield have to go to a team to build his confidence back up, and then we saw the same thing with Sam Darnold where he left Carolina and had to go be a backup for a year. And this simply could just be a scenario for Daniel Jones where he's going, I am just simply going to learn. I'm going to just build my confidence and be with someone like that. And that's why I'm not terribly shocked, because I really don't think anywhere that he was going to sign, he was ultimately going to be the starter this year. I think he was pretty clear that he was going to be the backup. I know there are rumblings about Jacksonville, but Trevor Lawrence is expected to, make his way back onto the field at some point this year. So it was going to be a game then. For if it was just a game, he's going into a scenario where head coach is on an incredibly hot seat and he's likely going to be gone next year. And how much did he really learn? And oh, you went to the Chiefs, but they already have their backups situated and sorted, or like where exactly he was going to go. So I think he actually landed in the perfect spot for him.
Yeah, and I mean, you do make a good point because I mean, being there with Kevin O'Connell, a fellow, you know, quarterback draft pick that didn't work out, went into the coaching side of things, and is turning it out to be a brilliant coach. And then also being able to hang out with Sam Darnold and go, so how did you deal with finally getting out of New York and turn your career around into what you're doing right now? And just picking his brain and figuring out what Darno did after his horrendous time in New York with the Jets before starting to float around the NFL before finding a spot with Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings where magically he's just that guy. And
Yeah.
so it does make sense, yeah, because he's got that mind of Kevin O'Connell. He's got the ability to work with Sam Darno and get on a same sort of career trajectory that way. So yeah, it could turn out to be the best possible move for Daniel Jones instead of going to another football market where he's going to be thrown right onto the field because, you know, the team is terrible at quarterback. The Raiders, another option. And all of a sudden it's just as bad. And everybody goes, okay, yep, it was Daniel Jones that was the problem. And then he doesn't get another shot. And he very much does have to, at that point, go, okay, I guess I just have to be a Kevin O'Connell where I try to be a coach now instead because I'm never going to get to play again. And so, yeah, this could be good for him, whether he ends up staying there next year or moving on somewhere else. It's going to create an interesting dynamic as we get to the offseason as well, having him out on the free agent market, because what are teams like the Vikings going to do? Are they going to roll with JJ McCarthy? Or are they going to re-sign Sam Darnold? There's other teams around the league where there's a lot of questions. Jameis Winston, where will he be? So, what's the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh going to be next year?
Yeah,
Are Russell
there's
Wilson
going to
or
be
Justin
more
Fields gonna be there?
quarterback openings than guys that you can sign or draft. And when I
Yeah,
say sign, I mean draft this year, because there's realistically only going to be 4 quarterbacks drafted in the first round this year. I'd be shocked to see more, but again, like you bring up that great point, is there's going to be more openings than there are players that can be drafted or filled in. And again, we
yeah,
talked about the Raiders last year, how they were the 7th team that needed a quarterback in the draft, and unfortunately there was 6 teams ahead that drafted their quarterback above them, and so they were just kind of left out, and they kind of had to ultimately deal with that sort of situation. So yeah, Daniel Jones could very easily find himself a starting quarterback job next year on a bad team. You bring up a team like the Raiders, chances are they're going to be drafting a quarterback this year, but you
yeah.
bring up a team like the Steelers, Justin Fields is likely going to leave. I think that's a pretty comfortable scenario that we could
Oh
say.
yeah.
And Russell Wilson, are you comfortable going into next season with Russell Wilson? And are the Steelers comfortable enough paying Russell Wilson what he is likely going to be asking them to pay him next year? And with the
Yep.
Steelers, with their situation with their cap and the players that they're going to need to potentially re sign, are they going to be willing to go out there and say, hey, Russ, I know you're asking for $35 million this year and next year, but we need that money to keep TJ Watt, who is really good at his job and we know we can rely on week in, week out. So it's a question mark there. Do you bring in Daniel Jones and just kind
Yep.
of hope that Arthur Smith gets him involved? And there again, you bring up a great point there. There's going to be so many openings that are available.
Oh yeah, I mean, another team that we talked about in our game picks video is the LA Rams, with Matt Stafford getting a little older, having a great mind like Sean McVay. Does he go somewhere like that to be the backup behind Matt Stafford's final year in the NFL and go, I'm going to learn here and learn the offense, and then I can step in and hopefully just replicate what Matt Stafford was able to do. And so there's going to be a lot of options out there. There's a lot of bad teams that'll need a quarterback too. The Saints,
Yep.
so it's going to be an interesting offseason with, as you said, only about 4 true rookie quarterbacks that'll get drafted and likely be competing for a starting job. And I really only think there's maybe 2 to 3 of them that will truly be able to win a starting job for next year, if that. And so there's going to be a lot of interesting moves and interesting developments in the quarterback market next offseason.
I think when it comes to the draftability of quarterbacks this year, you're going to see 7 to 10 quarterbacks drafted. You're only going
Yeah.
to see 4 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. Out of those 4 quarterbacks, I only truly have a first round grade on 2 of them. And after that, you just kind of look at it and go, these guys, there's going to be teams that have first round grades on these guys, and they're going to select them and bring them in and do this, that, and the other thing. But it ultimately just kind of goes down to that question of going like, ugh, like again, I think all 4 of the guys drafted in the first round this year will end up being starters at some point, if not for the entire season, for whatever team drafts them next year. But it's again, I think there's only one for sure guy in this draft, but even then, like you look back at last year's draft, you had Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner from the season prior, and then he was looked at as a generational prospect at quarterback. You had Jaden Daniels, who was just the previous Heisman Trophy winner, who looked like he could be a Lamar Jackson light. You had Drake May, who looked like he could be the next Josh Allen. Then you had at that point Michael Penix, who I just said if you take him in the first round, you're making a terrible mistake. Well, then after that, you had JJ McCarthy, who just won the national title and looked like at any point he could be at his peak like a Joe Burrow light, or he could be a less scared Derek Carr. Which Derek Carr, I know a lot of people, we make a lot of jokes about Derek Carr, but for the majority of Derek Carr's career, he's been a good quarterback. He's been a very consistent guy. If he just didn't get scared all the time and shit his pants on the field, then he would probably be viewed a lot better. And that's where I think JJ McCarthy could be. And then we also looked at Bo Nix. This is the most experienced quarterback to come into the NFL with the most playing time ever by a college quarterback. You can't dispute that sort of consistency. And it was like he could be a why am I Drew Brees type player where he's not going to be the strongest arm. He's not going to be the best athlete on the field. He's just going to be consistent. And this year you have a lot more question marks about these guys coming in than you did about all of the guys with the exception of Penix in my mind. Like it's a different year and it's a different class. But the last thing that I am going to say about the Chicago Bears, we are already in a civil war on what fans want to see the Bears do. And it's basically we need to go with the offensive minded crew, and then we need to have the defensive minded crew. And when listening to the defensive minded guys that say, oh, we need Mike Vrabel, he's going to come in and set such a great culture, I just go, wasn't that Matt Eberflus coming in to set such a great culture? And we've seen Mike Vrabel in the NFL. His offenses were bad, and I know people go, oh, he didn't want A.J. Brown traded away, and he was pissed off at his GM. Yeah, no, that's fine. You had A.J. Brown, but you couldn't do anything with him. You only were able to manufacture any sort of offense with Derrick Henry. Your defenses weren't elite. So I'm part of the offensive-minded tree for this one, and I've made this case so many times. You need to go with an offensive-minded guy for this team because of who you have at quarterback. And
Well, yeah, I mean, we had this discussion last week. I am the defensive-minded guy, and I said 100% wholeheartedly, the Chicago Bears job needs to be an offensive-minded guy, not defensive.
Yeah.
Like you guys are in a position. That defensive-minded head coach works way better if you've got a veteran, savvy quarterback that can take care of himself already. Then it's going to work better. When you've got a rookie developing, you want that offensive mind to start out for sure. In 10 years, if a coaching change is happening in Chicago and Caleb Williams has established himself as a top 3 quarterback and is comfortable running audibles and calling his own plays and all of that, then yes, at that point, you probably would want to shift over to that more defensive mind, CEO style head coach. But right now, offense needs to be the focal point. Your defense is going to be fine without a defensive minded head coach because you have a lot of talent at every position in that backfield. It's not a concern. You need the offensive mind. So the guys who are calling for defensive minds, they're just asking to replicate what you've seen for the last 18 months.
Yep. Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think the fear that a lot of those guys have is, oh, we're talking about trying to get this offensive minded guru. Well, look at what happened last time when that happened when we hired Matt Nagy. It's going, yeah, like I can understand some of the fear, but Matt Nagy was probably not the right choice because he was stuck in his way. And the fears with Ben Johnson that I hear so much is, well, can he come in, or he's just going to be another Matt Nagy because he came in with his offensive philosophy. The difference between Ben Johnson, I think I said Ben Jones earlier, but Ben Johnson and Matt Nagy had called 5 games as an offensive play caller, leaving to come be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Ben Johnson has done it for 2.5 years. He's going to have 2.5 years of offensive play calling under his belt. It's worked. And it's not Dan Campbell's offense. It's not anyone else's offense on that Detroit Lions. It's Ben Johnson's offense. When Matt Nagy was with the Chiefs, it was Andy Reid's offense that Andy Reid basically said, I'm going to allow you to call the plays, but I'm basically going to have my eye over your shoulder the entire time. And that's kind of the situation that was. So that's why I'm not as fearful. The thing that worries me for Ben Johnson is, can he take over that leadership role coming into the team? But you have that with every head coach that doesn't have the experience. And can he work his magic with the same offensive skill set without having that elite offensive line that the Detroit Lions have? For me, that is probably the biggest thing that I have worry about, is can his offense run and function the same without that top tier elite offensive line? But even then, you sign Trey Smith, you use 2 of those draft picks on offensive linemen, there's nothing to say that it can't be elite next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and the offensive line is where my concern with Ben Johnson lies, because a lot of Ben Johnson's success, yes, he's been an excellent play caller, he's doing phenomenal things, but that O-line was developed by Dan Campbell. And that's just it. That O-line, that tight end core, the guys blocking up front, that was Dan Campbell, not Ben Johnson. And so that is my question, is will Ben Johnson be able to take that knowledge he learned from Dan Campbell going to a head coaching role and go, okay, I know I'm calling the plays and stuff, but I need to make sure these O-linemen are getting up to that level that I had in Detroit so that I can still have that same success. That is where my concern with Ben Johnson is, and literally the only concern I have with Ben Johnson. I'm not really worried about his ability at leadership, because learning from Dan Campbell, I think he learned how to be a leader. You can't work with Dan Campbell for multiple years and not learn how to be a leader, because he is one of those guys. He is inspirational that way. Dan Campbell always has been. He is an emotional guy who always puts everything out there, and he makes sure everybody around him is getting better while he's learning himself. And so that's where I think Ben Johnson will be a great head coach no matter where he goes. I just think he's going to be better suited somewhere that already has an established offensive line.
Yeah, and for me, when it comes to the leadership, with, again, I talk about all of the head coaches that are candidates that aren't been previous head coaches, is that's the biggest concern. You have that with defensive minded guys too. We saw that with the previous head coach of the Chicago Bears, of where he was this brilliant defensive minded guy, but his leadership wasn't there. And that's a concern for everyone. I'm not worried about his leadership. Again, coming from Detroit, I think he was taught up and brought by Dan Campbell. Again, they worked with each other in Miami, and he was there before Dan Campbell got the head coaching job with Detroit, and he's kind of ultimately had to go that hard, successful route to be there. And I think he's learned. Again, we see the DC, Aaron Glenn, also be part of that, where he's likely going to be a head coach next year as well. So you and I think, are on the same page. It's basically just that offensive line worry, but other than that, I think we're kind of same situation with Ben Johnson. But that is going to do it here today, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. For Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying thank you all for hanging out with us. But till next time, peace.